I just remember, especially in my travels, and I get to spend so much time in Las Vegas for trade shows. You know, there's just such a popular trade, not anymore, obviously, with the pandemic, but I got to spend so much time out there. And they were, you know, Nevada was such a kind of an early state to adopt at least dispensaries with recreational marijuana. And so it was interesting to see the follow on of a new packaging restriction would come out at the state level in this state. And then the surrounding states that had been legalized would then look to that state as for guidance to see how they're doing it, because that kind of strict or lax, whichever the direction of the wind was blowing, would dictate substantial changes in packaging costs, in labeling requirements, in processing requirements, whatever they may be. So I'm curious for OBX, because you guys are a leader, you know, especially in not just thought leadership, but just the size of your facility. It's a beautiful facility, and we'll put the links and everything in the podcast description. Who do you look to for guidance, as a muse, as other than internally?
So, you know, as far as, guidance, again, we work really closely with, regulators, not only at the national level, but at the state level as well. You are starting to see, state by state, states really take a role and take it into their own hands to try and allow for there to be space in this category. So, New York State is a great example. A few months back, they came out with their guidelines for cannabinoid products coming to market within New York State. And those guidelines were very specific as far as dosage, as far as label guidelines, production guidelines.
Yeah.
And so it really gave people a much needed, kind of set of parameters in which to build and develop products.
Yep.
What that did, really overnight after those guidelines were published, we saw clients who had been more of an R&D client or waiting in the wings come out and go into full production and get ready
to shift over.
This is a shift. Like, we can at least do something in this state. Like, we now have enough information. They've given us the confidence to go for it. So, and that's just in the United States. We're a global company. So we're also, members of organizations like IHA in Europe.
Sure.
And their Novel Foods Consortium, who is doing a really great job at recruiting the top industry leaders in the space to collectively do the research and the toxicology studies and the safety studies to bring those ingredients and products to market throughout the UK and Europe. And so OBX is a participant of that program and a member of the Novel Foods Consortium for that reason, to, one, be part of building out everything that's going to be necessary to build the industry, as well as staying incredibly close to all of the various nuances. So you're talking state by state nuances in the United States for us to have a very clear and fluent understanding of, to help guide our clients. And the same applies overseas as well, on a country by country level, to understand the distinctions of, it's not only about what products you want to develop for your product line, but where and how you're selling them, and really being able to provide that level of support and service of exactly what you can and can't sell, what you can and can't say on your package, how you might have to have, different formulations for different markets. You might have to have different packaging requirements for different markets. And, that's, a task that our team takes quite seriously, because it's going to be so necessary for these brands to succeed. And it's really hard to navigate. It's quite complex. And to be able to have a kind of working, living, breathing cycle of this, where they're changing in real time. So you have to stay on top of it to really make sure you're doing it right.
And we forget that, like, the nation, the states, the continents, these are all just experiments. I think it was elucidated a little bit by the pandemic, where everyone was problem solving the same problem, but you can problem solve many different ways. And when you'd start to see someone doing it successfully, you'd emulate that and then exploit it where it was going, it was going wrong. And so there was always this tension and balance of like, acceleration and then pause, and then fits and spurts of like moving faster and then reevaluation. And I think that the approach of just being in the room as a leader, but then also part of the conversations is certainly a great approach. Is like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So like at least get there, like get to the point where you're
Yes.
having the conversations. We think of these terms divergent and convergent thinking a lot at Oat Foundry. And it's part of our new onboarding for new hires, where we say, divergent thinking is like an accelerator pedal in your car. Convergent thinking is like a as a brake pedal in your car. They are both critical for driving, but at the same time, they're useless. They're terrible to use at the same time. And so in meetings, we have this, you put it on the wall. Are we thinking divergently or are we thinking convergently? Are we trying to come up with ideas and it's about volume of ideas, or is it about judging those ideas and finding frameworks within which to judge them? I'm curious of not only experience with these kind of two halves of your brain for thinking, not that I have any kind of like neurochemistry or pathology background, but for the metaphor's sake, so the two halves of your brain for thinking, when you're in a meeting with someone who's being stubborn, how do you address that? This is like an HR question, but I'm curious.